I would like to welcome Dr. Mr.
Can everyone start off their video?
Hello, I hope I'm audible now.
Yes.
So at the start of the webinar, I would first welcome the participants of the webinar today and the speakers. I would like to warmly welcome Dr. Patnaik, Mr. Gogoi, Mr. Mehta, and my colleague Amol. Mr. Gopal Krishna Aluwal will be joining us shortly. So with my remarks before panel discussion. Technology-led transformation, such as artificial intelligence, has brought dynamic changes across various economic sectors in India. And I'm sure some of us are visible and also have been positively impacted. The advancement of AI technology brought with the benefits to consumers such as us in the form of new or improved products and services, more intelligent and faster delivery of services, and reduced transaction cost and increased speed. There has been a growing narrative globally for emphasizing the use of artificial intelligence for achieving sustainable development goals. Based on this premise, there has been an increased interest among the private sector and the government for the deployment of artificial intelligence in domains and in critical domains and sectors such as agriculture, education, healthcare, smart cities, and smart mobility. In the Indian context, with the release of the National Artificial Intelligence Strategy by the NITI Aayog, there have been initiatives to form a multi-stakeholder dialogue through the formation of excellence and centers of transformational artificial intelligence. Amongst all these initiatives, we must the needs of the citizens and not and bridge the gap in their understanding and knowledge of artificial intelligence mechanisms and empower them to make optimum utilization of these technologies. In fact, artificial intelligence comes as a key feature, and we must aim to develop a more trustworthy and a holistic ecosystem in the post-COVID world scenarios, where technology will play a crucial role in our everyday lives. However, it is a challenge. The panelists, 16 panelists of today will on some of these issues, such as bias, discrimination, privacy risks, dilution of consumer trust, and information asymmetry. With this, we look forward to today's webinar. I'll have my colleague Kulkarni to take over the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Uday, and I hope I'm audible and visible to all. Thank you for that opening remark, Uday, and welcome to all panelists. I think the panelists for the day do not need any introduction. The idea is to gather a broad understanding from across the policy making circles about the evolving AI ecosystem in the country, and how do we or how do they envisage its deployment for citizen welfare in coming years. Obviously, COVID has had a very great impact when it comes to citizen welfare, and we are seeing innovative uses of artificial intelligence. Would like to understand from the panelists and experts today as to how do they see the AI or artificial intelligence ecosystem evolving, and what do we understand or manage the concerns, and how can we involve all stakeholders in to ensure all concerns and optimal growth of AI ecosystem. With that, I have just one request for the speakers. we like to have a couple of rounds of discussion and also hopefully take some questions from the audience afterwards. So therefore, my request would be to the speakers would be to limit the interventions to 5 minutes each and with three broad points. I understand Mr. Gopal Krishna Agrawal would be joining us very soon, and therefore I would like to start with Dr. Amar Patnaik, who needs no introduction. Mr. Patnaik has been a keen watcher of the AI ecosystem in the country. He is on Parliamentary Standing Committee on of Personal Data Protection Bill, and he is also uh, uh, part of the informal group to study online pornography and its effects on children. Mr. Patnaik, my question to you is: you're aware, as Uday had mentioned, that there was an Ayog strategy on AI for all in 2018. After that, we saw that there were 4 expert committee reports by METI on artificial intelligence. Where do you see all this approach to AI going? What is the next step do you envisage government will take? And in that regard, do you think government has done enough to take on board concerns of all the relevant stakeholders, particularly citizens and consumers? This I ask you. This I ask you pertinently because you have been an advocate of broader cooperation between civil society, private sector, government, research institutions, and citizens for developing regulatory frameworks around AI and privacy and data protection. So, do you think we have done enough? If not, where have we fallen short of till now? And how do you think government should proceed to ensure inclusive development of AI ecosystem? Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Patnaik.
Thank you so much to everybody here, everybody who has joined the webinar. And thank you to the CUPS for organizing this great initiative. I saying that this question which you have posed to me, this precisely the same question I'd asked in an on-start question in the Parliament, to which the department had given a reply about the 4 committees that have been set up and their reports which have been posted on the website. I thought the committees were designed properly in the sense the 4 areas that they were looking for. One was on platforms and data, the other on national missions, that is, what are the key sectors in which the artificial intelligence can have a good intervention. The third one was on mapping technical capabilities, which is very important, skilling, reskilling, R&D. I think that's where I have a lot to say after this. And the fourth one, again very important, was on security, safety, legal and ethical issues. Now, why these are very important and whether we have done enough, that's what I'm going to speak about. And since I've been given 5 minutes, I'll just touch upon very key traits. The most important thing you see, as you see, all of us realize that artificial intelligence has come to stay, and I think we are pretty late into that because we have been talking about this since 17, came out on 18, and I think we still have not onboarded AI into the public sector or in the government as much as it should have happened. Where I think there is a lot of scope, particularly as you said, in the health sector, in the agriculture sector, in the education sector. And one thing which you missed out is more important, and that's climate change. Let's use of water. What would be the most important thing? How to ration the supply of water household-wise? Probably that's possible only if you are using AI. There are a lot of areas I don't want to talk about that. But all I want to say is that this consultation process, the code and all this which has happened, I think they need to move very, very fast, and that process is not happening. The second aspect is the collaboration that is required between the various sectors and the consumers, because consumers are the one ultimately who are going to be the benefited as well as going to face the brunt of the misuse of the AI. So their consultation, I think, is still inadequate. For example, let us say we passed the Consumer Protection Act, the new bill, in the last session. but I do not remember any kind of interaction, whether it has taken place between the consumer ministry and the MeitY, which has come out with the data protection bill. Ultimately, the data protection bill will have a very important, say, umbrella act over all these acts, because the issue that finally be most important is to have the trust of the consumer that there is an authority who is looking after their interest wherever AI has been used and there is a misuse of AI. So that has not probably happened, and that interministerial consultation, I think, has only remained on paper. The third thing that I would like to say is the introduction of we are trying to become followers. We are late, I know, but we should be the technology leaders, and that's what the mission paper says, that we want to be leaders and we want to do it in even other developing countries. We will become the garage where the innovations will take place. Now that doesn't happen unless you create the ecosystem. The ecosystem has to happen by aggressively pushing STEM in the schools, in the colleges, and then integrating the Atal innovation with this. A lot of integration work has to happen, which is not happening at all. Then the fourth thing rather, would be the fact that the integration between the government and the private industries that has also not taken place. There are very few startups. I know there are startups, but there are very few startups and very few unicorns. Why investment is not coming in? That's something that we have to look into. And I think the areas in government where there is so much of scope and potential, that has to be opened up as a kind of a driver for the private sector to jump in and push
you can see PSM
that is required. Sure. So I think initially I'll make these comments.
Thank you, Dr. Patnaik, for your insightful remarks, particularly on the lack of whole of government approach and need to ensure trust of consumers. Also, the need to absolutely.
One point, that is the research, the investment in the research and development, R&D. We had the ISRO. When we set up the ISRO long years ago, we are now the space leaders. We have to have something like this. If you are acknowledging that AI is going to be the most important innovation after electricity, then where is the kind of research investment or research setup that we have set in? We haven't. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. You can please carry on.
No worries, Dr. Patnaik. I think these are very insightful comments, and particularly on AI being the next big thing after electricity. So the need to consider it seriously as electricity. So I would now like to move on to Mr. Gogoi. Mr. Gogoi, you have been advocating about the need to use AI for job creation in different sectors such as agriculture, value chain management, and healthcare, tourism, and talking about AI or thinking about AI's role in job creation has become more critical in light of pandemic. However, as you also know that AI has also started to threaten jobs, particularly in IT, ITES and call center industry, and our billions of job creators who are in micro, small and medium enterprises face a lot of constraints to leverage AI, constraints in form of infrastructure limitations, unreliable connectivity, digital divide, below par capacity, particularly in semi-urban, rural areas and regions with difficult terrain. So how do we overcome these challenges to democratize AI for use of millions and of entrepreneurs and creators in the country? Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Gogoi.
Thank you to Kutz, and thank you to Mr. Kulkarni for the question. Let me take a step back and first of all say that India has a civilizational affinity for subjects related to science, technology, and engineering. I think adaptation and adoption to technology happens very fast within the Indian society. What does not happen equally fast is the policies by government and regulators to ensure this technology can be democratized, as you said, can lead to more employment, as you said. And what we see, especially in the startup sector as well, that even though India has, I would say, a booming startup sector, it has happened independent of government initiative. It happened largely on the basis of entrepreneurs who have raised capital themselves, who have taken huge risks. And all of this has happened without support from the government, completely different from what you see in a country like China, where the government plays a major role from end to end. Nonetheless, as you said, AI is not something related to information technology as well. It cuts across sectors. And I think that's the first point I would like to make, that artificial intelligence cannot be just restricted to the Ministry of Information and Technology. We need all our ministries to work together, collaborate together to find ways of integrating artificial intelligence even in the existing government schemes. So I'm saying let Ministry of Agriculture work with Ministry of Information Technology, work with Ministry of Tourism, work with Ministry of Skill Development. And can Government of India first use artificial intelligence in our own schemes, in our own programs, when we do Pradhan Mantri Kisan Yojana, when we do MGNREGA? I think if the government adopts and sees for itself the benefit of artificial intelligence in the delivery of government programs, in the distribution of rations via PDS, I think we will be much more forthcoming. When I say we, I mean the government. The government will be much more forthcoming in coming up with a policy that works quickly. Secondly, I must say that there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen between the government and the private sector. It seems that we are working in silos. The government understands that private sector may not raise enough capital. The government of India has access to a lot of capital, but the conversation that I would like to see, that is not happening. And therefore, I would say that it is necessary for more roundtables between government at the central level and the private sector, startup, entrepreneurs, Indian startup and entrepreneurs, so that we can have a common vision and therefore we can have a common roadmap. It's great that, there were these committee reports, but I was looking at the membership of some of these committees, and often the membership of the committees rarely had somebody from the private sector or from the startup sector. So I feel even if you look through those committee reports, I've read one or two, the language seems very cut off from the reality. If you listen to an interview of the CEO of Manthan or the founders of VOA.ai, it's a very different knowledge that you gain than from reading those policy committee reports as well. So I think me as a policymaker, I would encourage much more dialogue between the private sector and the government to understand what their concerns are, as well as place our concerns related to consumer privacy, related to cross-border data flows, related to our vision of having a data digital economy within India. And lastly, I come from an engineering background myself. In my undergraduate, I did engineering in electronics and communication. And I see this in the information technology sector. And I see this currently in artificial intelligence, machine learning, emerging technologies as well. That the education sector within India has a lot to work upon when it comes to preparing the next generation of Indian coders and Indian engineers and Indian entrepreneurs. Our education sector is woefully underperforming. And one proposal that we had seen was that in 2017 there was 100% FDI in higher education was agreed upon, which would mean that the best of science and technology and engineering institutions across the world can invest in India. Unfortunately, while we have this policy of 100% FDI in higher education, we have not seen the participation of some of the world's best technology universities, and that needs to come in. The government of India are planning centers of excellence, but without partnership from the academy and from the best of academy of the world, these centers of excellence will just not reach its potential. On the last point related to employment, you've seen in COVID, during the COVID-19 crisis itself, most of India's employment is in the unorganized sector, is in the informal sector. They're working in the construction and real estate sector. So my sense is that artificial intelligence, whatever job losses that AI will lead to, will happen at a higher skill level, not at the skill level that we see most of India being employed, not at the farm labor level, not at the construction labor level. It will happen at a medium skill to high skill level. But at the same time, I'm quite confident that whatever changes to economy that artificial intelligence will bring, it might create job losses in one sector, but after our economy being transformed, being more competitive, being more scaled up, it will lead to job openings in another field. So I'm quite confident, and I think we should push this. And I must say, I'm quite confident, like we've seen in technology, in call centers and outsourcing boom, AI will have the same role. India will be, will be a high quality, affordable, value-based strategic input for the AI ecosystem in the world.
Thank you for your inputs, Mr. Gogoi. I think you have really made the point on framework following technological development, and that is something that needs to be taken care. Also, we have also emphasized on the point of siloed approach amongst different government departments on the inability to use and leverage AI, and a lack of enabling and supporting institutions such as partnership with educational and research institutions to ensure that we leverage the potential of AI for the country. I would like to move on to Mr. Pradeep Mehta now. Mr. Mehta, you have been following global developments on artificial intelligence very closely, including how countries like US and China have invested to develop their AI ecosystem. You have also heard the two policymakers today who have lamented on the failure of government departments to speak with each other on the siloed approach and lack of whole of government approach to leverage AI. You also know that the Prime Minister has recently emphasized on technology-driven self-reliance. And do you think that is the right approach to AI? How do we, with this vision, how do we attract global investment and expertise in the sector and enable partnership between private sector, public sector, and more importantly with consumers and citizens of this country to leverage AI ecosystem? Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Mehta.
Very much. And let me also greet Dr. Pathak and Mr. Gogoi. And I heard the excellent remarks which were made just before you invited me to speak. Now, when you, among the question that you asked is attracting investments in the AI sector. Mr. Pathak very rightly said that we could get to the Mars because of the institutional backup that we created from the Indian Space Research Organization. And that's an excellent analogy to think as to what kind of independent agency which is established in order to promote AI as well as the accompanying technologies. AI is something totally new, as much as space research was at one point of time. And mind you, I would also like to inform our two members of parliament that the ITES sector, the Information Technology Enabled Services sector in India, also flourished and splendid in spite of any government support. It is not necessary. What was required was the provision of a good telecom network, which allowed our own ITES entrepreneurs to be able to cash on to this. So what the government needs to do is to provide the backbone, to provide the enabling circumstance, the enabling environment in order for AI to flourish. And as I said, the idea of the point which was made by Dr. Pathak in terms of starting an agency like ISRO would be very sensible. A very important point which Mr. Gogoi made also needs elaboration. The issue of siloed approach in the government, the whole of government approach doesn't happen in any policy area, Mr. Gogoi, unfortunately. That's because of the human psychology of us Indians. We do not wish to share what knowledge we have with anybody else. We see the same siloed approach within the same ministry, the same department, that from one desk to the other desk, information is not shared. That is a big tragedy, and therefore there should be some penalizing provision for anybody who doesn't do that. Now, investment will flow more. Investment will flow if you create that enabling environment, as we did in the case of ITES. So we have an analogy right in front of us in order to see to it that we can also start leading the world in AI, which is possible. Indians are very capable, technologically very bright, and the reason why you find Indians in technology spots all over the world is a proof of that point, that if you provide that enabling environment, then we would certainly flourish. We've seen in Silicon Valley in the US is mostly populated by Indian entrepreneurs and not by American entrepreneurs. Thank you. Thank you, Amol.
Mr. Mehta, I think you have rightly pointed out the need to create that enabling environment to ensure that we leverage the potential of AI. I think this is something that we need to spend some more time on, given that often creation of enabling environment and industry or collaboration between different stakeholders is just limited to collaboration between industry and private and policymakers. And which brings me to the next question that I have for Dr. Patnaik is, you also talked about creation or ensuring more or better partnership between private sector and the government. However, in several areas we have seen that such partnership often results in creation of, say, self-regulation, co-regulation, and code of conducts and principles and guidelines for the industry. We have also seen that this often results into regulatory sandbox and such other innovative mechanisms for industry to experiment with their novel products or innovations. However, do you not think that this has the risk of resulting into regulatory capture and design of regulation by regulated entities? You have yourself pointed out the need to hear consumers and citizens much more. So how do we ensure that such private sector and government partnership does not result in short shifting of principles of fairness, transparency, accountability, and non-discrimination, which are critical for ensuring consumer welfare? Do you think that civil society can act as an effective watchdog? And if yes, how? What is the way forward, sir? Over to you. Dr. Patnaik.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah. So thank you so much. It's a very good question. The point is, let us understand what the AI does in a sense. In essence, what it does is that it reduces transaction cost, as you said very correctly, by applying technology, data crunching, analytics, using data basically to provide services which are curated, which are better, affordable, quality. All these aspects are involved, and so the transaction cost comes down. The transaction cost comes down also because of reducing information asymmetry. Generally, transaction costs arise in economics because of the principal agent problem and information asymmetry. So what the AI does in a good thing is to do reduce these things and make services more affordable, accessible, qualitative, many such things. But there is a problem. The problem is there are also issues of deep fakes, data phishing, the smart spying, capacity to manipulate socially, and you have the story of the China's social credit system. So what happens is there is a great amount of information asymmetry which is created between the customer or the consumer and the person who is having the data or who is supplying the AI. So that has to be reduced. Now, how to do it? Now, of course, there is a data protection bill which is on the anvil. I'm in that committee. Gaurav is also in that committee, and that's going to come, and that will probably take care of a number of issues relating to when it finally evolves. I'm sure it is going to build trust between the. That's very important, because when there is an information asymmetry, there is a tendency to lose trust, and when the consumer loses trust, when the citizen loses trust, no amount of system, no amount of improvement technologically in the system will work. So therefore, you need to have a very independent and very functionally mature and functionally competent data protection authority. All that having been said, but most important thing you see in AI and all these things is, let's say nuclear science. When the atom bomb was created, when the nuclear fission took place, there were two questions: whether it will be used for peaceful purposes or whether you will have the Hiroshima kind of a thing. And we know what happened. So in all these things, the ethical issue is always involved, and that's dependent on the society as a whole, the moral issue. So we have to go by code of ethics and code of conduct. But initially itself, if you put in a lot of regulations, particularly let's say in the context of India, where we have just, I think we have to make it flourish. I think it should be more in the role of a facilitator to facilitate rather than to regulate. And regulation should be more in the nature of facilitating the application of AI, particularly in the government sector, where there is a lot of scope, and actually it can have a kickstart from there. But having said all that, I would also say that the need for a watchdog, let's say a consumer watchdog, may be necessary from the point of view of consumers, but whether that watchdog will have the competence, will have the kind of resources necessary to exercise that kind of oversight is also important. But that has to be developed, and I think the Consumer Protection Act provides for something called as consumer councils, if I remember correctly. So these consumer councils can actually work together with the Data Protection Authority and develop a kind of an ecosystem in which there is some kind of an oversight applied to them, is equally cognizant of their privacy issues and is equally competent of their concerns relating to they not being, there is no surveillance on them, whereas at the same time getting good services, affordable services, fair, reasonable, and the fact issue of accountable, transparent, and fair. So it's a very, I can't answer that question with regard to a binary kind of yes or no. I think we have to initially start now as a facilitator, and as we progress, as AI progresses, and the concerns relating to the consumers takes precedence, we need to have a mechanism of a consumer oversight mechanism, working with the Data Protection Authority to give trust to the consumer that the AI that they are relying on is not infringing or breaching their privacy. Lastly, I would like to say that in all this kind of an exercise, the sandbox innovation, which is there in the data protection bill as well, I think it is a good innovation. But the approach that should be initially followed is to have a hands off. As I said, it's a part of the facilitation exercise. It is not to be taken as a conflict of interest issue with a regulator, because I am seeing no role for a regulator right at this stage, at the infancy of the AI taking off. I think the ecosystem is yet to be created to have a regulator sitting and maybe spoiling or impeding the progress of application of AI in various sectors in innovative ways in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. for your interesting remarks, particularly on the need for cooperation between the consumer protection regulator and the data privacy regulator, and having a more professional consumer watchdog. I think Mr. Mehta has a point to intervene. Let's hear from him very quickly before we move ahead. Mr. Mehta?
Dr. Patnaik, my apologies, I've been calling you Dr. Pathak.
No, that's all right. Thank you.
It is extremely heartening listening to you and your very, very wise remarks. The Consumer Protection Bill has the provision for a Consumer Protection Authority.
Yes.
And not a councils already exists, which are basically a multi-stakeholder body, which make policy recommendations to the government, and then it depends upon the government to accept it or not. We've been members of many councils since the time when Consumer Protection Act came into being in 1986. We've been able to make good use of it, depending upon the type of minister. As you know, I mean, it all depends upon, what kind of minister you have or what kind of secretary you have in order to drive the agenda forward. We've had some very good times, including at one time P.V. Narasimha Rao himself was the chairman as the holding the cabinet portfolio for food and civil supplies. And things really moved fast at that point of time. I remember there was an excellent secretary also who followed Narasimha Rao's. A lot of things have been happening. Now, the point which you stressed is the issue of competence. Now, competence has to be built up in each of these authorities. The Consumer Protection Authority is still a clean slate. It's not predetermined. It has certain duties as per the Act, which is to deal with misleading advertising or deceptive claims, for which there is no body in the country. It used to be handled by the MRTP Commission, but the Parliament in its wisdom decided to not give that provision under the Competition Act of 2002, with the result that the Competition Commission of India doesn't deal with unfair trade practices. So there was a gap for a long time that we had to fill up. What the Consumer Protection Act does allow is that it is of an adversarial nature. You see, I can take forward a complaint before a consumer court, which is the three-tier courts, and to demand an action, but I have to prove that I've suffered loss due to the negligence of the other party. So it's a very legalistic process. That we hope the Consumer Protection Authority will be able to deal with. And as I said, any authority that we build up, if we are able to get the right people to head it,
absolutely,
and they can build up the competence that look, these are the things of the day which we want. The problem, Dr. Patnaik, is often that you find retired bureaucrats occupying these positions. They are all parking lot positions, and there is a cartel of retired bureaucrats who take all the positions which come up. In spite of the halla gulla in the Parliament, we find this continues to happen. Minister said we will not allow it to be parking lots, but in the end, the cartel is so powerful, the steel frame, that they occupy all these spots, and many of them don't understand these things at all. And with the result that, as you rightly pointed out, what is required is optimal regulation which doesn't kill innovation. And they then they tend to become controllers without understanding what the meaning of the word regulated is, or an independent regulator is. Right? This is something which is of a fundamental nature, Dr. Patnaik, which needs to be dealt with by parliamentarians and not let it go by along and along. Thank you.
I fully agree. Mr. Mehta. In fact, one thing is that they are sinecure jobs for the retired bureaucrats, and the second is their selection is also non-transparent. Selection, at least in the case of other constitutional authorities, there is some kind of a system of a leader of opposition and others being involved. But here there is no such system in most of these authorities. And as you said very correctly, it is as if the God's wisdom has been only given to such people, and the rest of the people do not matter. That is unfortunately the situation of all regulators in this country. That's why I was very skeptical when I talk about regulators. I come with a bureaucratic. I come from the CAG's organization. I took voluntary retirement 10 years ahead to join politics. So I know I have written reams of audit reports during Vinod Rai when he was the CAG on these matters, that the regulators, the appointment of a retired bureaucrat, sometimes very often the outgoing secretary of the department into the regulator is actually the regulatory capture. That is actually the regulatory capture that takes place.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta and Dr. Patnaik. I would now like to welcome Mr. Gopalakrishnan Agrawal. He has, I think, joined and he has been patiently listening to the discussion which has been happening since last 10-15 minutes. I think, Mr. Agrawal, as you might have heard, we have talked a lot about a siloed approach within the government, lack of whole of government approach to leverage AI for citizens' welfare. You have also heard about the lack or suboptimal competence and regulatory regime which can push AI ecosystem, and inadequate government and private sector participation. So, having been close to the government in your various capacities, how do you think government looks at some of these issues, and what is the way forward, particularly from government's point of view? We also are aware that most recently the 4 committees which were constituted by the MeitY, the Bharatiya Janata Party had constituted a consultative group on big data, AI, and building state capacity. So, can you throw some light on government's thinking on the way forward, and what concrete steps can we expect in the future, and how do we address the risks which have been discussed right now in the conversation? Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Agrawal.
I'm audible? Thank you, Mr. Anmol.
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Yeah, Mr. Pradeep Mehta, Mr. Amar Patnaik ji, and other colleagues who have joined this meeting. I'm sorry for the delay. I had a very important meeting on these discussions that this announcement, certain things were to be clarified. We had certain meetings. So I got late in this discussion. I heard some of the very valid points of Mr. Amar Patnaik ji, and you have posed me some questions. Definitely, these concerns have been brought out to the government. I'll just put up 3 points on that. First thing is that the government has now recognized, you talked about the BJP taking initiative and putting up certain committees. I have been spearheading those discussions and dialogue. Earlier, it started with RCEP, then it went on the budget, and now currently, where we had set up 4 consultative committees and gave an extensive report on the current crisis and what the government needs to do. The government has first thing has realized 2-3 points which are very important for all of you to understand. That the feedback which is coming to government just was through bureaucratic channels earlier, majorly those coming from the department, etc., there directly, or through certain regular organizations, big business associations, etc. Government realized that we need to connect more with the stakeholder directly and have a better feedback. Suggestions are more forthcoming, they are crisp, and finally, they are mostly an advisory in nature, which the government can decide which has to be taken, which has to be not taken into, which have not to be implemented. So they found that with the Bharatiya Janata Party having a very big network of reach of people with more than 16 crore people, and so that was a good channel through which they could get the feedback from the people, one thing. And therefore, these discussions and consultations started, and they have we have been very successful in giving the feedback from the stakeholders to the government. And for that, we had an extensive exercise that were undertaken. First, any topics will be decided, where even we get some certain topics from the government also, what they want a feedback from the party. On that basis, we set up a research committee, then discuss, and then after talking to the people, finally those suggestions are given. And in that exercise, only this one important thing was big data, artificial intelligence, this state capacity building. So one thing is, this is an alternative channel where the stakeholders' opinion, other than the bureaucratic channel, is coming to the government, which is being appreciated and liked by the government, and this is giving a better feedback to the government. One thing. Second, even on the regulatory and the tribunal also, we had several times discussed in other places, at many places in the government, that the composition of tribunals is very important, because at any issue which is taken up by the government, the departmental review of that thing takes place in the department, bureaucratic review of any decision, etc. The government department does it. The issue of tribunals, etc., particularly regulations you have been talking, but tribunals, I tell you that the issue was tribunal, the composition was very important. Over the year, what happened was the stakeholders' participation in those tribunals has come down. This has also come to the light of the government, that the tribunals, etc., should have more representation from the expert and the stakeholders. And there also some sort of ex-bureaucrat sparking also was taking place. So this is also an issue that the recognition, or which has been brought to the government also, that ultimately tribunals should have the stakeholders and domain expert who can give a opinion counter to bureaucratic review. This is the second important point that I would like to mention is. And on the regulation also, the department, we should all, I think, what happening is, we should also understand from the government perspective also, what is happening is, basically any regulation coming by any regulator, I have been working with many regulators, they put it in the public domain. What happens is, various association and stakeholders, at times I have seen, they do not preempt or give suggestions when they are in the public domain. And once that, after there is a time period during which any regulation, this the government is judiciously following. It may be somewhere, there may be less, but government is following, regulators are asked to follow that any regulation which concerns the market participants or the stakeholders has to be put into public domain first and collect reactions. What is happening in the association, etc., they don't react or give opinion in beforehand. And once that regulation is implemented, then there are so many suggestions. Therefore, we see CBDT has to amend so many things, whereas SEBI has to do so many things. But it would be very beneficial for organizations like CUTS and other things which are very active, I see, on many issues, particularly consumer protection, consumer rights, etc. And policy matter, CUTS is giving a lot of inputs. So they should, I don't know whether you have that system, but you must be having, with my discussions at various platforms in your system. But if we make that more efficient, and even you can use the party platform also, from that also you can say share to party, we will also forward whatever points we consider. So this is the third issue that I wanted to make. On the, particularly on a big data and state capacity and data sovereignty, I put one point before all of you is that over the last 6 years, Narendra Modi ji has a philosophy of how the government works. This is very important. One thing is, I talk about 4 important aspects of government policy making at present, is that in our government, we identify the problem and do not try to recognize it and not put it behind any carpet, and acknowledge, the first thing is acknowledge a problem as early as possible. Second important step that the Modi ji is working is come out with a technological solution and bring an ecosystem, a technological ecosystem to find a solution to it. The third is integrate the stakeholders which will implement those solutions. Just, the biggest example, एक आपको मैं बोल दूंगा, but that will all give you an example on thinking, is Jan Dhan account, that direct benefit transfer, etc. That whole banking channel was established. So identify the problem. NPA was identified. Then similarly, leakages in the government service delivery was identified. Then build an Jan Dhan account, Aadhaar ecosystem around it, integrate all the stakeholders. And the fourth important part was come out with a performance matrix where you can evaluate your government decisions or give them. And therefore, all targets have been set up, whether it is 9.5 crore toilets or now 15 crore tapped water to every household, identified 115 backward district, aspirational district, and make the district DM accountable so that every eligible person in his district gets the benefit of these 7 important schemes of the government to his doorsteps. So set up a target, push for that target, 2 crore this poor housing project that has been set up. So these are the 4 important: identify a problem, bring a technological solution, integrate the stakeholders, and set up a performance metric. And in this whole process, Abhi bhi, if you see, those announcements are being made today also on agriculture or yesterday, etc. You will find that lot of artificial intelligence, technological driven solutions have been built in so that there is a better delivery in government schemes. And government want to build up state capacity in delivery of its schemes and its beneficial schemes, etc., so that leakages are removed. So for that, the important aspect is big data, artificial intelligence. Because without this, state capacity at the center and the national level cannot be built. On that focus, we were given, this committee was set up to give some suggestions. I would put some of those points to your reference. And one more point I would also like to mention before I put some of the important points to your consideration was that the government is setting up a startup council, because the government thinks that the startup and can come out with new solutions, whether it is through hackathon or whether through other Atal Innovation Mission or Atal Tinkering Labs or at the college level, Atal Labs, at the school level and at the college level, and Atal Innovation Mission. In the budget also, we had announced so many schemes for startup. So now very big focus will be on this startup creating startup ecosystem, where a separate startup council involving people is being set up, so that we have good feedback and we have good industry connect and people having domain knowledge to push that. So these are important points. Where suggestion that came to us, the important thing was this national data sharing and accessibility policy the government has. There is a good suggestion that we should now rework on that. So I think CUTS can work on that and give their suggestions on what are the this data sharing policy and accessibility policy, where improvement can take place. One point thing was there. And even on yearly calendar of release of data, the government should in advance announce that yearly where the data collection, when the data will be released, because there is a lot of debate on the data. Any government policy, whether it is for the benefit of the consumers or industry or the needy sections, etc., will not be effective unless we have proper data mining and data collection, data analytics, etc. So a data making more and more data to the public domain is very important. So there are other points also. I don't know how much time I have, so that we can. Do you want me to take it in questions or some more time you want to give me?
No, I think we have got a idea of your interventions. I think let us hear from others also, and we have been getting a lot of questions as speakers have spoken. So maybe I'll
In 2 minutes, then I will finish some of the
take
points.
one of the question.
2 minutes, I'll just put the data anonymity and
Okay.
data localization is an important issue which the government thinks that data privacy, there are a lot of discussion. So these issues have to be incorporated at the government level, but data ownership, etc. is has to be checked, and its data localization is required, server etc. is required to be existent into the geographical domain of the country. That is also very important, because I am a chartered accountant also. We have seen how profit transferring etc. take place because of these issues are not, if the management and control is not there in the geographical domain of the country. So these are some of the issues which have come out in the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal, for important interventions, particularly the four-step process which you have laid down, which government follows. And I'm sure we at CUTS would like to engage with you and the government on national data sharing, disability policy, and other initiatives. However, now I would like to quickly move on to the questions. And the first question is to Mr. Guroi, which also flows from what Mr. Agarwal was saying. Mr. Guroi, you have heard Mr. Agarwal about government stance on data localization, and you had also talked about this issue when you spoke. So, how important do you think it is for India's domestic industry to participate in digital value chains? And is tech nationalism in form of data localization a hindrance to participation in global value chains? Your stance, please. Thank you.
Well, what we have seen post the 2008 global financial crisis is that the world is becoming much more inward looking. And we are part of that system. So you have seen the United States of America stepping out of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, stepping out of the TPP agreement. India has stepped out of the RCEP negotiations. So we are all becoming inward looking, looking after our domestic interests first. And there is a trend towards deglobalization. And I think this is something that the current COVID-19 crisis has also pushed for, that, some call it deglobalization, some others call it self-reliance. But we are becoming much more cut off from each other. And therefore, data is going to be, I foresee, one of those areas where many countries, not only India, but many countries would focus more or prefer data localization, would like to keep as much of the data inside and have much more stricter standards. I am not going to make a value call on this or make a judgment on this, because I'm part of a committee, and I don't want some of my opinions that I share in a committee with here, but what I'm sharing is my observation. I think India is part of a larger set of countries who post global financial crisis and the COVID-19, which will focus more on nationalism, and data nationalism, I foresee would be something that many would clamor for. Now, my question always remains is, what is the interest of our Indian entrepreneurs? Because in the end, what I said earlier, or what Pradeep Mehta ji said earlier, that especially in the IT space, the progress or the advancements in information technology, and even later on in emerging technologies, will happen irrespective of the government of India or the state government. Our entrepreneurs are that good and that good at adding value, so they would go on. So my question is, again, whatever direction our policies take, we should always have we should always question that a philosophical direction should not have an impact, or a hard or pragmatic impact, or a negative impact on our entrepreneurs and our domestic IT sector as well. So I think that's something that we will have to balance in the future. And my only thing I would say is that it's necessary for government capacity building was a point that I heard earlier, and I think that's very essential. I do believe that the government of India, maybe at the central level, has the some capacity building can always be done. But I'm more concerned about state governments, because many policies and or the hardware that we're talking about, the backbone infrastructure, also happens at the state level. So there's a lot of capacity building work that has to happen at the state level, and central government will have to play a big role. And again, we'll have to work with the private sector. I think it would be great for a central innovation fund in which we give a significant amount of money, let's say 100 crores to every state government to come up with an artificial intelligence based public service, whether that's in the field of tourism, whether that's in the field of education, whether that's in the field of health. But as I said, this entire experimentation needs to come out of the central government and needs to flow into the state governments. And I agree with what Pradeep Mehta said, that we need to create the infrastructure, the hardware. So we really need to focus on data centers. We need to focus on 5G technology. We need to focus on incubation centers. And again, focus on our education. So the pipeline of Indian talent, human talent is always there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intention and particularly your suggestion on a fund which can be created. We also get a lot of questions for Dr. Patnaik. Patnaik, there are two sorts of questions that people want to ask you. One is, given the diversity of the use of AI from low tech to high tech, including space exploration, do you think, and the need to have a focused approach to leverage AI, do you think we should have an institute like ISRO for AI? You have talked about light touch regulation at the initial stage, but don't you think that there is a need to put in place basic ethical regulations with regards to AI, just like the ones promulgated in different countries, particularly the United Kingdom? Your take, please. Thank you.
Like the ISRO, which do we need to build it? I spoke earlier in my presentation that we need to, just like our space mission has now become one of the best, or for some time is one of the best in the world. And we had organizations like ISRO, or even in the science and technology like the Indian Institute of Science. We need to have this. Let me also tell that that there are several countries in which there is a separate ministry of AI, Ministry of Artificial Intelligence. Where we have to have that fine balance between too much of compartmentalization, and at the same time retaining that interministerial or interdisciplinarity, which is very essential for really unlocking the value of using AI in any particular way. Having said that, I would personally feel that instead of having a ministry, maybe we should have an organization like ISRO, and not just Niti Aayog coming out with these reports, because ISRO is one organization, if you see, it is the space scientists, hardcore scientists. They have developed everything this country has done, and then they have also finally different arms which have gone and marketing it, using that technology to other, selling the technology to other countries to launch their rockets and whatever. We could actually do the same thing here, because whatever would succeed, let us say, using an AI application in agriculture sector, let's say soil conditions being linked to or being mapped to, using data being mapped to what is going to be produced depending on what is the climate, by taking the climate data and then tying it up with, let's say, marketing arrangement. Now, whatever would succeed in a country like India would actually be very, very useful or very likely to succeed in a number of developing countries. And there is a lot of, rather, I would say, human improvement when you will contribute as a Biswaguru, as they say. We will probably become a leader in innovation, but more importantly, we will also get revenues for our country. So there is a need for having a separate organization to be manned by scientists, hardcore people who do research and innovation and find out or identify areas where you can have AI applicable. Let's say, as Gaurav said, Gauravji said about public service. Now we have a Public Service Delivery Act which is giving different timelines for imparting delivery of services, and which we know rarely happens, even though there is a penalty of some 25,000 rupees. So I think in order to achieve that, we should actually make it open for it's in the government sector. Let us make it open. Let us call for innovation from private sector, how to ensure that the land record is given in 15 days or 2 days or 3 days to one particular person. I'm giving you the example. The revenue administration in this country is the best business case for implementation of blockchain. We haven't done it. Only 2 states have done. Now, that's a tragedy. And I gave this statement to FICCI in one of the FICCI meetings 5 years ago, and still nothing has happened. So I think we need to have a central agency for hardcore people who are scientists who will do the innovation, how it will actually grow in terms of knowledge base, and another set of people probably to identify areas, which I think the Niti Aayog report says, which are the areas in which this can be implemented. The second question is relating to, I think, can you just tell me again, what is the question about?
Yes, the second question was, should we not have some ethical principles in place, just like UK, etc., while we talk about light touch regulation,
yeah, that's right.
to leverage the potential for AI?
We may not have very strict, hard regulations, as I have said also. I have said that we need to be a facilitator at this point of time. And in technology space, you see, how did the diffusion of technology takes place best when there is no regulation? Take the example of internet. So if you really want the diffusion of technology to take place, there should be very less of regulation. A lot of self-regulation probably would be required. And that could be mandated through a code of ethics and code of conduct, which will be imposed on themselves. But at the same time, we will have an authority which will give confidence. The ultimate idea is to give confidence. Why are we using all this, developing all this technology or making use of technology? It is for the citizens. It is that the citizen gets the benefit. And if he doesn't have the trust that he's getting the right, affordable, qualitative, and something which he can trust, he will not go for it. So ultimately, we have the code of ethics, but to see that there are, to ensure that they are followed and there are no breaches, we also need to have a authority like the Data Protection Authority, which would ensure that the privacy of the citizens is not breached or is respected. There is a proportionality, there is data minimization. All these aspects will come into it. So there is a convergence on that point. But how far it will go, I think as the time progresses, we should think.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. And the last question is to Mr. Gopal Agrawal. So you talked about public consultation and governments taking citizens and private sector views. The question is, should we not move forward and look at best practices like cost benefit analysis and regulatory impact assessment while framing regulations, so that we do not restrict ourselves to taking views of public, but analyze them objectively and come forth with some costs and benefits of proposed regulations to different stakeholders? This is a best practice in different countries, and so what is stopping India from adopting this? Thank you. Over to you, sir, Mr. Agrawal.
Now I am on. I think the main issue is the participation of various association and public in the policy making. That is sometimes very lacking in India themselves, and we respond late. This is an issue that we have to consider, whether they are research associations or think tanks, etc. And putting everything on the government and then talking that the government is not giving us freedom is a counterproductive. This both thing I saw in many of my personal experience. One thing, we want everything to be done by the government, and the second time when the government start doing, then we say the government has taken. initiated. I think on this artificial intelligence and all this issue, I think there is an ample space, and the government has this mindset that private sector has a big role to play in this whole service delivery, artificial intelligence, building state capacity. And we have seen various private companies who have come out with so many innovative solutions, and they are doing good. There are certain issues with regard to them, and the regulation will also evolve as the actual ground level realities come into force. The second important factor I would like to mention here is that our research, etc., should be linked in the universities. What is being I have found lacking is that in the universities, etc., very little research is taking place, and whatever research, etc., is taking place, its commercialization is not taken into consideration. Those research, whatever is taking, is it a commercially usable? That connect also have to be established by those research, etc., universities only, and they create value out of it, create IPR according to this. Though I know that there are several issues in IPR that the government is trying to fix so that knowledge economy is built. But university have to build more capacity in properly doing good research into any activity or solutions, and in bring out the commercial aspect of that research, so that industry connect and research universities connect is established. And government is open with the private sector involvement in many issues. We have seen even there are criticism, whether it is GST network or other various payment gateways, etc. Also, there are issues that private sector is being involved, and what will be the data, who owns those issues are there. But ultimately, that capacity, etc., is not everything that the government can do. And the third point that I would like to mention is there is a big social debate on overemphasis on privacy issues. When you are working with an hygiene of data and on using an anonymous data without data to the government, how government policy will be more effective and beneficial and targeted? No government policy can be targeted without proper data. Second thing is the input of data and survey, etc., whatever it is, unless that goes to the government, the government policies will not be very good. The effectiveness and improvement in the government policy will happen from the data. There is a certain reluctance on the social debate that we are, I think, are emphasizing on privacy issues. We can have faith on various private organizations, but then we talk that if the data goes to the government, there is a privacy issue. So surely there is a privacy issue, but we have to have a faith on the government institutions that whatever they are stating, they will be committed, because we have a strong judiciary also if there is a misuse of any data, etc. So these of the things that I wanted to bring out to building a strong capacity on the this area.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Thank you for your interventions. I'm sure we all know that privacy is a fundamental right in this country, and therefore adequate checks and balances are required. And with that, I think I would like to move to the closing remarks section. I would request my colleague Shubhangi to deliver the closing remarks. Thank you.
I want to thank all the speakers for this great discussion and shedding light on some very important points. And I think the crux that has come out of the discussion is that as we are moving towards a post-COVID world, digitization and technology is going to play a crucial role. And there are different policy levers that has to be managed to optimize the use of artificial intelligence. And this relates back to optimal regulation and realizing a regulatory sandbox approach and adequately protecting the interest of the consumers. Also, at the same time, I think educational institutions and research institutions has a great role to play in articulating the research and implementing the research better. And I think moving forward, we should consider the collaboration of civil society, academia, and the industry to put forth some of the solutions which can be taken into consideration. And I think one of the larger point is to take a whole of government's approach and understand the interministerial linkages which can be established, so that the artificial intelligence can be leveraged across sectors, and better public service delivery can be achieved, especially for achieving more inclusion, and for schemes like MNREGA, and enhancing direct benefit transfers. With that, I would like to close this webinar. I would especially like to thank all the distinguished speakers who have taken out the valuable time and contributed to this webinar, and all the participants for raising some of the great questions. And I want to thank Amol for great moderation of this webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you once again, and we hope to continue this conversation offline as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Namaskar.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.